Hello, my name is Rachel Gilbert, and this week we are discussing the women and their influence in the American Revolution. One of the most famous women of the American Revolution is Betsy Ross, and she famously, supposedly, made the first American flag. Laura Thatcher Ulrich writes on how Betsy Ross became famous that were it not for her putative role in the creation of the nation's flag, Betsy's life would be indistinguishable from the mass of American women who lived through a war, survived widowhood, raised families, and sustained communities. She goes on to say, Betsy Ross will not go away because she gives women a part in the revolutionary narrative without disrupting its heroic outlines. And she's simply an ordinary woman using her ordinary skills to do something patriotic. Well, there are many women who obviously did something sacrificial, something patriotic during the time of the American Revolution. In fact, early in the war, the women who had become major consumers and purchasers by the mid-18th century became instrumental in effecting the boycotts of British goods imposed by the Stamp Act Congress. They were the ones who introduced the homespun material and to find ways to make do without British goods, and it became even a political statement for the women as to what they chose to purchase, what they chose to wear. So it was an implied independent decision-making, as over 400 Bostonian ladies even began their own boycott agreements. And in February 1770, their names were published in the paper, which was highly unusual for that time and kind of risque. In the North Carolina, October 1774, ladies traveled from miles around to create and issue the Edenton Resolves, which again involved boycotts. What women chose to purchase suddenly had political overtones. And in those times, women were not considered to be smart enough, educated enough to have political opinions. In part, this again was back to the education and the role of domesticity that they were considered to be relegated to. And they were groomed to be married, not to participate in civics. But the principles of freedom that were established in the American Revolution took a couple hundred years to work themselves out for those implications about equality under the law, such as voting being expanded to non-owners, non-landowners, men who are not white, women. The slavery issue had to be dealt with. Native Americans, that issue had to be dealt with. So women pushed for more independence from men, some of them anyway. Some of them, of course, did not, but some pushed for more independence in their own small ways, such as Abigail Adams. She pushed for better education for women. She pushed for getting rid of what's called coverture, C-O-V-E-R-T-U-R-E, which means that a woman is under her husband's protection. She is not allowed to own any personal property, and as a result, there's nothing she can call her own. However, Abigail Adams rebelled against this while John Adams was in Europe on his diplomatic missions, and she bought land and she speculated in bonds, and she managed her land and finances and trade and such, so that she amassed quite a bit of money. And eventually she made a will that would have to be honored. Well, wasn't have to be honored, but John did honor it. She left most of her money to her female descendants, and that was honored and was given them something that they could call their own. And so she pushed for some economic independence for women. Susan Haskell Rowson also pushed for independence for women. She was a novelist. She wrote Charlotte Temple. So, of course, she was pushing for some literacy, some literary independence, some education for women, some economic independence. Part of the problem in her novel, Charlotte Temple, was that this young woman made some horrible decisions with her life. And as a result, she could not get out of the consequences. She could not get out of the hole she dug in for herself because of her lack of education and therefore her lack of resources. And that was pointing out a problem in the society of the time. Judith Sargent Murray also argued for better education for women. She herself wrote The Gleaner, which is a collection of her writings, eventually published under her own name. Again, very risky for the time, but she argued for economic, political independence, intellectual, literary equality, and better education for women.